The massive space station Nexus 7 floated quietly in the darkness between the stars. Its silver walls reflected the light from distant suns as thousands of alien beings went about their daily lives inside. The station was home to 7 different species from across the galaxy, all living together in peace for over 300 years. Commander Jake Morrison gripped the sides of his command chair as another explosion rocked his ship. The UCS Defiance shook violently, throwing crew members against the walls. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the lights flickered on and off. "Hull breach on Deck 7, shouted Lieutenant Amy Carter from her station. Her voice was tight with worry as she watched her screens fill with red warning lights. "We're losing atmosphere fast." Morrison wiped blood from a cut on his forehead and looked at the main display. His ship was dying around him. The surprise attack had come from nowhere. Strange black ships with no markings had appeared out of empty space and opened fire without warning. The Defiance had fought back, but there were too many enemies. "Sir, the warp drive is completely dead," called out Chief Engineer Rick Hayes from the back of the bridge. His uniform was torn and dirty from crawling through damaged corridors. "But I might be able to get the emergency jump system working. For one more trip." Morrison nodded grimly. They had no choice. His crew of 200 people would die if they stayed here. The attackers were still out there hunting for survivors. He had to get his people to safety, even if it meant jumping. Blind through space. "Do it, Rick," Morrison ordered. "Get us out of here." Hayes worked frantically at his controls. The emergency jump system was never meant for long-distance travel. It was dangerous and unpredictable, but it was their only hope. "Jump in 10 seconds," Hayes called out. "Everyone hold on." The ship lurched forward as reality bent around them. Space twisted and stretched in ways that hurt to look at. Then everything went black. When the Defiance came out of the jump, alarms were screaming throughout. The ship. Morrison struggled to focus his eyes on the main screen. They were near a huge space station unlike anything he had ever seen. The station was enormous, easily 10 times bigger than any human structure. "Where are we?" asked Captain Kate Sullivan, Morrison's second in command. She pulled herself up from the floor where the jump had thrown her. "I don't know," Morrison admitted. "But we're alive, and that's what matters right now." Amy Carter checked her instruments with shaking hands. "Sir, I'm picking up signals from that station. Lots of them, but the computer can't translate any of it." Morrison studied the strange station on his screen. It had multiple arms extending from a central hub, each arm different in design. Some parts looked organic, like they had been grown instead of built. Other sections were clearly made of metal and crystal. It was beautiful and alien at the same time. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," Carter reported. "It's coming from the station." "Put it through," Morrison said. Strange clicking and whistling sounds filled the bridge. The translator tried to make sense of the alien language but could only produce broken fragments. Words like unknown, dangerous, and impossible came through clearly. Morrison made a decision. "Amy, broadcast on all frequencies. Tell them we're peaceful and that we need help. Use the basic diplomatic protocols." Carter nodded and began transmitting. She spoke slowly and clearly, explaining that they were explorers from a distant world who had been attacked. She asked for permission to dock and requested medical help for their wounded. On Nexus 7, Administrator Zexhai stared at his screens, in disbelief. The reptilian alien scales changed color from green to deep red, a sign of extreme fear in his species. The impossible had happened. A human ship had appeared in his sector. Humans were legends, stories told to frighten young ones. They were supposed to be myths, creatures of chaos who brought destruction wherever they went. Ancient texts spoke of beings who could adapt to any situation, who fought with terrible creativity, and who never gave up no matter how hopeless things seemed. But the ship on his screens was real and it was badly damaged. The humans inside were broadcasting messages of peace, asking for help like any other species in distress. Zexhai's training told him to offer aid to any ship in need, but his instincts screamed danger. "Administrator," called his assistant, a blue-skinned humanoid named Veltar. "The security chief wants to speak with you immediately." Klaktor, the station's head of security, was a massive insect-like being with forearms and compound eyes. His species, the Kythera, were natural warriors who had served as peacekeepers for centuries. When he spoke, his voice buzzed with barely controlled aggression. "Administrator, that ship must be destroyed immediately," Klaktor declared. "The humans are a threat to every living being in this sector." "They're asking for help," Zexai protested. "Look at their ship. They can barely maintain life support. They're not a threat to anyone right now." "That's exactly when humans are most dangerous," Klaktor replied. "When they're desperate, they become unpredictable. I'm mobilizing the defense fleet." Zexai watched as 12 ships from various species began moving toward the human vessel. Each ship was armed and ready for battle. The administrator felt sick. He had spent his entire career maintaining peace between different species. Now, he might be about to start a war with beings that most people thought were fictional. On the Defiance, Dr. Lisa Bennett worked desperately to save the lives of injured crew members. The ship's medical bay was full of people with burns, broken bones, and worse injuries. She had already lost 3 patients and more were dying. "Doctor, we need you on deck 12, called a young medic over the intercom. "There's been another hull breach." Bennett grabbed her medical kit and ran through corridors filled with smoke and debris. She found 5 crew members trapped under a collapsed beam. Working quickly, she managed to free them and get them to safety. But she knew that without proper medical facilities, she was going to lose more people. Back on the bridge, Morrison watched the alien ships surrounding his vessel. He could see weapons charging on several of them. His own ship was in no condition to fight. Most of their weapons were offline and their shields were failing. "Sir, they're powering weapons," Carter reported quietly. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his crew, about the families waiting for them back on Earth, about the first contact protocols he had studied but never thought he would need. Then he opened his eyes and made the hardest decision of his military career. "Stand. Down all weapons," he ordered. "Drop what's left of our shields." "Sir?" Sullivan asked in surprise. "If we're going to die, we're going to die as explorers, not as conquerors," Morrison said firmly. "Amy, transmit our medical data and damage reports to the station. Show them everything. Let them see that we're not a threat." Carter's fingers flew over her controls. Within minutes, detailed information about the Defiance's condition was broadcasting to every ship in the area. The transmission showed the extent of their damage, the number of wounded crew members, and their desperate need for help. The alien ship stopped moving. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, one of the smaller vessels began approaching the Defiance. It docked gently with the human ship, and Morrison felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to survive this after all. The small alien ship that had docked with the Defiance belonged to the Villani, a peaceful species known for their healing abilities. Their representative, a tall being with pale blue skin and large silver eyes, stepped carefully onto the human ship. The Villani medic carried a translation device that crackled with static as it tried to understand human speech. Commander Morrison met the alien in the docking bay, flanked by Captain Sullivan and 2 security officers. The human crew kept their weapons holstered, showing they meant no harm. The Villani medic studied Morrison with obvious curiosity and fear. "I am healer Nixara," the alien said through the translator. "Your people are hurt. I can help, but my leaders are afraid of you." "Why are they afraid?" Morrison asked gently. "We're just explorers who got lost." Nixara's silver eyes widened. "You do not know? Your species is spoken of in the old stories. Humans are said to bring chaos wherever they go. You fight in ways that make no sense. You never surrender, even when death is certain." Morrison exchanged glances with Sullivan. They had no idea that humans were known in this part of the galaxy, even as legends. "We don't want to fight anyone," Morrison said. "We just want to help our injured crew and repair our ship." Meanwhile, on Nexus 7, Security Chief Klaktor paced angrily in the command center. His forearms gestured wildly as he spoke to Administrator Zexai. The insectoid warrior's compound eyes glowed red with agitation. You should not have let Nixara board their ship. Clactor buzzed angrily. The humans will take her hostage. Or worse. They are unpredictable creatures of war. Zexai's scales shifted from red to yellow, showing his uncertainty. The Villani wanted to help. It is their nature to heal the wounded regardless of species. And the humans have done nothing threatening so far. Yet, Clactor replied. They have done nothing threatening yet. But the old texts warn us about their nature. They adapt quickly to any situation. They turn anything into a weapon. They cannot be trusted. Back on the Defiance, Dr. Bennett was amazed by the Villani healer's abilities. Nixara could somehow sense internal injuries without any scanning equipment. Her touch seemed to speed up the natural healing process in human cells. Together they worked to save the most critically injured crew members. Your healing methods are strange, Nixara observed as she watched Bennett work. You cut into the body to fix what is broken inside. My people find this disturbing. Sometimes you have to break something a little more to fix it properly, Bennett explained as she carefully sutured a wound. How do your people heal without surgery? Nixara placed her hands on a crew member's broken arm. A soft blue glow surrounded her fingers, and the human's pain visibly decreased. We encourage the body to remember how it should be, but your species heals differently than ours. Your bodies are more stubborn. Engineer Rick Hayes was having his own encounter with alien technology. A small team of station engineers had come aboard to assess the Defiance's damage. They were led by Torvan, a member of the crystalline Zephyri species, whose body looked like living glass. Your ship's design makes no sense, Torvan said, his voice ringing like crystal chimes. These systems are not built for efficiency. They appear to be designed for adaptation. Hayes grinned as he showed the alien engineer around the engine room. Human ships are built to be fixed with whatever we can find. See this power coupling? It's made from 3 different types of metal because that's what we had available. It shouldn't work, but it does. Torvan examined the jury-rigged repair with fascination and horror. This violates 17 different engineering principles. How does it function? Sometimes the best solutions don't follow the rules, Hayes explained. We humans are good at making things work when they shouldn't. Lieutenant Amy Carter was making progress with the alien languages. Her natural ability to learn new words and sounds impressed the station's communication officers. Within just 2 hours, she could speak basic phrases in 3 different alien languages. How do you learn so quickly? Asked Quindal, a furry mammalian, being from the Nexari species. It took me years to master even 1 additional language. Humans are good at copying sounds and patterns, Carter explained. We have to be. On Earth, we have thousands of different languages. If we couldn't learn quickly, we'd never be able to talk to each other. Word of the humans' unusual abilities was spreading throughout the station. The medical staff was amazed by Dr. Bennett's surgical techniques. The engineers were baffled by Hayes's unconventional repairs. The communication department was impressed by Carter's rapid language learning. But not everyone was pleased by these developments. In the station's council chamber, representatives from all 7 species gathered for an emergency meeting. The chamber was a circular room with each species having their own section designed for their specific needs. The Sauran delegation, led by Administrator Zexai, sat in a warm, humid area with heat lamps. The Cathera security forces occupied a section with bright lights that their compound eyes preferred. The crystalline Zephyri needed a section with specific mineral compositions in the air. The humans are more dangerous than we thought, declared Counselor Vexistari of the tentacled Hydrani species. They adapt too quickly. They learn our languages, our medicine, our technology. What if they use this knowledge against us? They have done nothing hostile, countered Counselor Melira of the plant-like Floriani. Their healer has saved lives. Their engineer has helped repair our damaged systems. Their communication officer has tried to build bridges between our peoples. Security Chief Clactor stood in the center of the chamber, his forearms spread wide. This is exactly what the ancient texts warned us about. Humans appear helpful, at first, but they gather information about their enemies. They learn weaknesses. Then they strike when least expected. Administrator Zexhi's scales turned a deep purple, showing his frustration. These texts you keep mentioning are thousands of years old. They might not even be about the same species. The description matches perfectly, Clactor insisted. Bipedal beings with forward-facing eyes, skin that changes color with emotion, the ability to survive in many different environments. Most importantly, the ability to turn any situation to their advantage. While the council debated, Commander Morrison was learning about the station's history from Nixara. The Villani healer had stayed aboard the Defiance to continue treating the wounded, and she seemed genuinely curious about human culture. Nexus 7 has been a place of peace for 3 centuries, she explained as she worked. 7 species, all different, all living together without war. It is our greatest achievement. That's impressive, Morrison said. On Earth, humans have trouble getting along with each other, and we're all the same species. Nixara paused in her healing work. You fight among yourselves? Sometimes, Morrison admitted. But we also help each other. During disasters, humans from different countries work together to save lives. During wars, we've learned to make peace where complicated. This conversation was being monitored by the station's security systems, and Clactor was listening to every word. To him, Morrison's admission that humans fought among themselves was proof of their dangerous nature. You see, Clactor told the council, they are a warrior species that cannot even maintain peace with their own kind. How can we trust them with our safety? But Councillor Melira of the Floriani had a different interpretation. If they fight among themselves yet still help each other during disasters, perhaps they understand both conflict and cooperation better than we do. As the debate continued, long-range sensors at the edge of the system detected something troubling. A large fleet of unidentified ships was approaching Nexus 7. The same black ships that had attacked the Defiance were coming, and they were bringing friends. The chaos among the stars was about to get much worse. The alarm bells on Nexus 7 rang throughout the massive station. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor as 50,000 alien beings looked up in fear. The long-range sensors had detected 37 unknown ships approaching fast from the outer system. In the station's command center, Administrator Zexhi stared at the tactical display with growing horror. The approaching fleet was massive, far larger than anything the station's defenses could handle. His scales shifted rapidly through different colors as panic set in. How long until they reach us? He asked the sensor operator. 4 hours, Administrator, replied the young Nexari officer, her fur standing on end with fear. They're not responding to any communication attempts. Security Chief Clactor studied the sensor data with his compound eyes. Something about the ship design seemed familiar. The vessels were long and dark, with no visible markings or identification. They moved in perfect formation, like predators hunting prey. I know these ships, Clactor buzzed grimly. These are the Void Hunters. They're raiders who attack settlements on the galaxy's edge. No one has ever survived to report their tactics. Commander Morrison arrived in the command center just as Clactor finished speaking. The human officer had been invited to the emergency meeting, though many of the alien leaders still viewed him with suspicion. Did you say Void Hunters? Morrison asked. Those are the ships that attacked us. We barely escaped with our lives. Every alien in the room turned to stare at Morrison. Zexhi's scales turned bright yellow with surprise. You fought them and survived? That's impossible. No one survives the Void Hunters. We didn't fight them, Morrison corrected. We ran, but not before we got a good look at their weapons and ship designs. I might be able to help you prepare for what's coming. Clactor's forearms crossed suspiciously. And why would you help us? Your species is known for taking advantage of others' weaknesses. Morrison looked around the room at the frightened faces of beings from 7 different species. Because those raiders want to kill everyone on this station. That includes my crew, who you've been helping. It also includes innocent people who don't deserve to die. Dr. Bennett had been working non-stop to treat not just the human crew, but also alien civilians who had been injured in various accidents around the station. Her surgical techniques had saved 3 Soren children who had been hurt in a collapse. and she had helped a elderly Floriani recover from a rare plant disease. The alien medical staff watched in amazement as Bennett adapted her human medical knowledge to treat completely different species. She studied their anatomy quickly, asked the right questions, and found ways to help them heal faster. "Your methods are so different from ours," observed Dr. Kylara, the station's chief medical officer. The tall, thin, Zephyri crystalline being sparkled as she spoke. "You take such risks cutting into living tissue without knowing exactly what you'll find. Sometimes you have to take risks to save lives," Bennett replied as she finished treating a young Hydrani's injured tentacle. "We humans learned a long time ago that playing it safe doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to try something new." Meanwhile, Engineer Hayes was working with the station's technical teams to prepare defenses against the approaching fleet. The aliens were impressed by his ability to combine different technologies in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow did. "This power coupling you've created will overload within minutes," worried Torvan, the crystalline engineer. "It violates every safety protocol we have." Hayes grinned as he connected the final cable. "It'll overload, sure, but first it'll give us 3 times normal power output for exactly the time we need it. Sometimes you have to break things to make them work better." Lieutenant Carter had made remarkable progress with the alien languages. She was now fluent enough to help coordinate communications between all the different species on the station. Her ability to switch between languages and translate complex ideas was helping everyone work together. "The humans learn faster than any species we've ever encountered," reported Quindal to the emergency council session. "Lieutenant Carter can now speak 7 different languages well enough to coordinate our defense efforts." But it wasn't just the practical skills that impressed the aliens. It was how the humans approached problems. Where the alien species would carefully study a situation and follow established procedures, the humans would immediately start trying different solutions until something worked. Captain Sullivan had taken charge of organizing the civilian evacuation procedures. She worked with representatives from all 7 species to create plans that could save as many lives as possible if the Void Hunters broke through their defenses. "We need to move the children and elderly to the station's core," Sullivan explained, to the mixed group of alien officials. "The core has the strongest shielding and independent life support. But the core is where we keep our most important cultural artifacts," protested Counselor Vextari of the Hydrani. "Those items have been preserved for thousands of years." Sullivan looked at the tentacled being with genuine confusion. "You'd rather save objects than children?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the alien species, cultural preservation was deeply important. But Sullivan's direct question made them reconsider their priorities in a way they never had before. As the Void Hunter fleet drew closer, Morrison shared everything he knew about their attack patterns. He explained how they had used surprise and overwhelming firepower to disable the Defiance before the human crew could mount an effective defense. "They target engines first," Morrison told the mixed group of military leaders. "Then they go for communication systems. They want to isolate their victims and prevent them from calling for help." "How many ships do they usually attack with?" asked Commander Zelnath of the Cathara Defense Force. "When they hit us, there were 12 ships," Morrison replied. "But they're bringing over 30 now. They must really want to finish what they started." The revelation sent a chill through the alien commanders. The Void Hunters had tripled their force just to make sure they could destroy 1 damaged human ship and a peaceful space station. Clactor studied the tactical information Morrison had provided. Despite his distrust of humans, he had to admit that Morrison's intelligence was valuable. "If what you say is true, our standard defensive formations will be useless." "Then don't use standard formations," Morrison suggested. "The Void Hunters expect their enemies to follow predictable patterns. If we do something unexpected, we might catch them off guard." This kind of thinking was completely alien to most of the species on Nexus 7. They had maintained peace for 3 centuries by following carefully established rules and procedures. The idea of deliberately breaking those rules was terrifying. But as the enemy fleet grew larger on their sensors, some of the alien leaders began to realize that their traditional ways might not be enough. They were facing an enemy that had never been defeated, and they might need to try something completely new to survive. Young aliens throughout the station had been listening to the humans tell stories about Earth. Carter had shared tales of human history, including how different nations had learned to work together during times of crisis. The alien youth were fascinated by the idea that cooperation could emerge from conflict. On Earth, humans fought terrible wars, Carter had explained to a group of mixed-species children. But we also learned that we were stronger when we worked together. Some of our greatest achievements came from former enemies becoming friends. These stories were now spreading through the station's population. Parents who had been afraid of the humans were starting to see them differently. Maybe the chaos humans brought wasn't destructive. Maybe it was the kind of change that could help everyone grow stronger. As the Void Hunter fleet entered the outer system, Administrator HFY made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. He officially requested that Commander Morrison and his crew join the defense of Nexus 7 as full partners, not just refugees seeking help. The chaos among the stars was about to become something else entirely. The Void Hunter fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system like a swarm of deadly shadows. 37 black ships arranged themselves in perfect attack formation, their weapons already charging for battle. On Nexus 7, every being held their breath as they watched the enemy approach. Commander Morrison stood in the station's command center, surrounded by alien officers who had once feared him. Now they looked to him for guidance against an enemy that had never been defeated. His damaged ship, the Defiance, hung next to the station like a wounded guardian. "They're moving exactly like they did when they attacked us," Morrison observed, studying the tactical display. "Same formation, same approach speed. They don't think we can hurt them." Administrator HFY's scales had turned a deep blue color that showed determination mixed with fear. "Our defense fleet has 12 ships, they have 37. The mathematics are not in our favor." "Numbers don't always win battles," Captain Sullivan said from her position at the communications console. "Sometimes it's about doing what your enemy doesn't expect." Security Chief Clactor buzzed with nervous energy, his forearms constantly moving as he coordinated the station's defenses. Despite his earlier distrust of humans, he found himself relying more and more on Morrison's tactical advice. "The Void Hunters are sending a message," reported Lieutenant Carter, who was now serving as the primary translator for all communications. "They're demanding that we surrender the human ship and its crew. If we comply, they say they'll only destroy half the station." A shocked silence filled the command center. The alien leaders looked at each other with horror. The Void Hunters were known for their cruelty, but this level of callous brutality was beyond what anyone had imagined. "Half the station means 25,000 people," whispered Dr. Kylara, the Zephyri medical officer. "They're talking about murdering thousands of innocent beings." Morrison felt a cold anger growing in his chest. These raiders had already tried to kill his crew once. Now they wanted to slaughter innocent civilians just to get to him. "We're not surrendering anyone," he said firmly. "If they want a fight, we'll give them one." The defense fleet began moving into position around Nexus 7. Ships from 7 different species formed a protective barrier, their weapons powered and ready. But everyone knew that conventional tactics would not be enough against such overwhelming odds. Engineer Hayes had been working frantically with the station's technical teams to prepare surprises for the enemy. His unconventional approach to engineering had produced several modified systems that shouldn't work according to alien science but somehow did. "The power grid modifications are complete," Hayes reported to Morrison over the communication system. "We've got 3 times normal output available, but only for about 20 minutes before everything overloads." 20 minutes might be all we need," Morrison replied. "What about the other surprises?" Hayes grinned, though no one could see it through the communication link. "Let's just say the Void Hunters are going to learn why human engineers have a reputation for creative problem-solving." Dr. Bennett had prepared the medical facilities for massive casualties. Working with alien medical staff, she had created treatment protocols that could handle injuries from multiple species. Her surgical techniques had been adapted to work on crystalline Zephyri, tentacled Hydrani, and insectoid Kythera. "We're as ready as we can be," Bennett reported to Morrison. "But I hope we don't need to use any of this." The Void Hunter fleet reached weapons range and immediately opened fire. Massive energy beams lanced out toward the defending ships, expecting to overwhelm them with superior firepower, just as they had overwhelmed the Defiance. But the defense fleet didn't respond the way the raiders expected. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, the ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Some dove toward the station itself, others climbed away from the plane of battle, and a few actually flew straight at the enemy. "What are they doing?" demanded the Void Hunter commander from his flagship. "This formation makes no tactical sense." That was exactly the point. Morrison had convinced the alien commanders to abandon their traditional defensive strategies. Instead of fighting the way their enemies expected, they were creating chaos and confusion in the battle space. Captain Sullivan was coordinating the defense from the station's command center, using Carter's translation abilities to communicate with ships from all 7 species simultaneously. Her tactical experience was helping the diverse fleet work together in ways they had never tried before. "Blue Squadron, dive toward the station and come up behind the enemy's left flank," Sullivan ordered. "Green Squadron, use the asteroid field for cover and hit them from above." The Void Hunter ships found themselves under attack from unexpected directions. Their perfect formation began to break apart as they tried to respond to threats coming from all sides. For the first time in their history, they were being outmaneuvered. But the enemy still had superior numbers and firepower. 2 of the defending ships were destroyed in the first exchange of fire, their crews lost before they could escape. The station's shields began to flicker under the impact of enemy weapons. That's when Hayes's modifications came into play. The station's power grid suddenly surged to 3 times normal capacity, feeding energy into weapons systems that had never been designed for such output. Defensive lasers that should have been barely effective against capital ships suddenly became deadly threats. "Impossible," muttered the Void Hunter commander, as his ship's shields collapsed under fire from what should have been weak defensive weapons. How are they generating that much power? The answer was Hayes's unconventional engineering. He had bypassed every safety system on the station and jury-rigged connections that violated basic principles of alien technology. The modifications would burn out within minutes, but those minutes might be enough. Morrison had been waiting for the right moment to play his strongest card. The Defiance was still damaged, but Hayes had managed to repair one crucial system. As the enemy fleet pressed their attack, Morrison gave the order his crew had been waiting for. "Launch all missiles," Morrison commanded. "Full spread, target their command ship." The aliens had never seen human missile technology before, where their own weapons traveled in straight lines and could be easily tracked. Human missiles were designed to be unpredictable. They changed course randomly, used decoy signals, and attacked from angles that seemed impossible. The Void Hunter flagship found itself under assault from weapons that behaved unlike anything in their experience. Some missiles missed completely, but others struck home with devastating effect. The enemy commander's ship began to lose power and maneuverability. But the most important effect wasn't the physical damage. It was the psychological impact on the Void Hunter fleet. For the first time, they were facing an enemy that fought in ways they couldn't predict or counter. Their perfect tactical discipline began to crumble. "Sir, 3 of our ships are requesting permission to withdraw," reported the Void Hunter tactical officer. "They say the enemy is using impossible weapons." The enemy commander felt something he had never experienced before in battle: uncertainty. His fleet was still larger and more powerful than the defenders, but they were taking casualties against an enemy that should have been easy to defeat. Meanwhile, civilian aliens throughout Nexus 7 were watching the battle on their personal screens. They saw human tactics saving alien lives, saw former enemies working together to protect innocent people. Children from 7 different species cheered when enemy ships were destroyed. "The humans fight like no one we've ever seen," observed Counselor Mel Ira of the Floriani. "They turn weakness into strength, chaos into victory." But the battle was far from over. The Void Hunters still outnumbered the defenders, and Hayes's power modifications were beginning to fail. Sparks flew from overloaded systems throughout the station as the jury-rigged connection started to burn out. "We've got maybe 5 more minutes of enhanced power," Hayes reported. "After that, we're back to normal defensive capabilities." Morrison looked at the tactical display, calculating odds and possibilities. The enemy was hurt but not defeated. They needed something more, something that would end this battle decisively. Then he had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. Morrison's idea was indeed completely insane, which made it perfectly human. He turned to Captain Sullivan with a grin that made her nervous. She had seen that expression before, usually right before he did something that defied all military logic, but somehow worked. "Kate, I need you to coordinate with Hayes," Morrison said quickly. "Can we overload the Defiance's reactor core and use it as a massive bomb?" Sullivan's eyes widened in shock. "Sir, that would destroy our ship completely, and we'd need to get close enough to their fleet to make it count." "Exactly," Morrison replied. "They won't expect us to sacrifice our own ship to win. No rational species would do something that crazy." Administrator Zexhai overheard the conversation, and his scales turned bright orange with alarm. "Commander, you cannot seriously be considering destroying your only way home. Without your ship, you and your crew will be stranded here forever." Morrison looked around the command center at the faces of beings from 7 different species who had welcomed his crew despite their fears. Children, families, and innocent people who had shown kindness to strangers from another world. "This place is worth protecting," Morrison said simply. "These people are worth protecting. Sometimes you have to sacrifice what you have to save what matters." The decision sent ripples of shock through both the human crew and the alien population of the station. Dr. Bennett paused in her medical preparations. Engineer Hayes stopped his repairs, and Lieutenant Carter looked up from her communication console with tears in her eyes. But they all understood. This was what humans did. When faced with impossible odds, they found impossible solutions. When everything seemed lost, they refused to give up. When people needed help, they helped, even at great cost to themselves. "How long do you need to prepare the reactor overload?" Sullivan asked Hayes over the communication system. "Give me 10 minutes, Hayes replied from the Defiance's engine room. "But someone will need to pilot the ship manually. The automatic systems won't be able to handle what I'm planning to do to them." Morrison was already heading for the shuttle bay. "I'll take her in myself. Kate, you're in command of the defense fleet. Make sure those Void Hunter ships don't scatter before I can get close enough." Captain Sullivan felt her heart sink as she watched Morrison leave. She had served with him for 5 years, and she knew that once he made up his mind about something, nothing could change it. But she also knew he was right. This crazy plan might be their only chance to save everyone. The Void Hunter fleet was regrouping after their initial confusion. Their commander had restored discipline to his ships and was preparing for a final assault that would overwhelm the station's defenses. He had lost 7 ships to the humans' unexpected tactics, but he still had 30 vessels against the defenders' remaining 9. "All ships, prepare for concentrated bombardment," the Void Hunter commander ordered. "Target the station's main reactor. We'll destroy the entire structure and be done with this." But as his fleet moved into bombardment formation, something unexpected happened. The damaged human ship began moving away from the station, directly toward the enemy fleet. Its engines were glowing brighter than normal, and energy readings were off the charts. "What is that ship doing?" demanded the Void Hunter tactical officer. "Its course will take it straight into our formation." The enemy commander studied the readings with growing concern. The human ship's power output was increasing, beyond safe limits. No rational commander would push their engines that hard unless they were desperate or insane. Morrison sat alone on the bridge of the Defiance, his hands steady on the manual controls. The ship shook around him as Hayes pushed the reactor beyond. All safety limits, warning alarms screamed from every console, but Morrison ignored them all. "Hayes, how much longer?" Morrison asked into his communicator. 2 more minutes, sir," Hayes replied from the engine room. "The containment field is already starting to collapse. When it goes, it's going to make one hell of an explosion." Through the view screen, Morrison could see the Void Hunter ships growing larger as he approached. Some of them were turning to face him, but they were still in tight formation, perfect for what he had planned. Back on Nexus 7, thousands of aliens watched the screens in stunned silence. They were witnessing something that went against every instinct of self-preservation. A human was deliberately flying his ship into certain death to save people he had known for less than a day. Young aliens who had listened to Carter's stories about human history suddenly understood what she had been trying to tell them. Humans really would sacrifice everything for others, even strangers. It wasn't just a story, it was who they were. "All ships, intercept that human vessel," ordered the Void Hunter commander. "Destroy it before it reaches our formation." But Captain Sullivan had anticipated this. As Void Hunter ships moved to stop Morrison, the defense fleet attacked them from behind. Alien ships that had never worked together before fought with perfect coordination, buying Morrison the time he needed. 60 seconds to reactor overload, Hayes announced over the communication system. "Sir, you need to get to an escape pod now." Morrison looked at the control panel and made a calculation that chilled his blood. If he abandoned the ship now, it would drift off course. The explosion wouldn't catch enough enemy ships to make a difference. Someone had to stay at the controls until the very last second. "Negative, Hayes," Morrison said calmly. "I'm staying with the ship. Get yourself to an escape pod, that's an order." "Sir, I can't leave you here," Hayes protested. "You can, and you will," Morrison replied firmly. "Tell my crew they served with honor. Tell them they're part of something bigger now." Hayes reluctantly abandoned the engine room and headed for the escape pods. As he ran through the corridors of the dying ship, he could feel the reactor building toward critical overload. In 30 seconds, the Defiance would become a miniature star. The Void Hunter ships were firing everything they had at Morrison's ship, but the human vessel kept coming. Its shields were gone, its hull was burning, but it stayed on course through sheer determination. The enemy commander finally realized what was happening. "All ships, scatter immediately," he screamed into his communicator. "The humans are going to ram us with an overloading reactor." But it was too late. The Void Hunter formation was too tight, and they had waited too long to understand the threat. Morrison guided the Defiance into the center of their fleet just as the reactor containment field finally collapsed. The explosion lit up space like a new sun. 22 Void Hunter ships were destroyed instantly, vaporized by the massive energy release. 8 more were heavily damaged and left drifting helplessly. Only 7 enemy vessels survived intact, and they immediately fled the system without looking back. In the aftermath of the explosion, search and rescue teams from Nexus 7 found Hayes' escape pod floating in space. He was alive but unconscious, protected by the pod's emergency shielding, but there was no sign of Commander Morrison or the Defiance. Both had been consumed in the reactor explosion. The victory celebration on Nexus 7 was subdued. They had survived, but at a terrible cost. The human who had shown them a new way to face impossible odds was gone, along with the ship that had brought chaos and hope to their ordered lives. Dr. Bennett stood at the window of the medical bay, looking out at the debris field where the Defiance had made its final stand. Beside her, healer Nixara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your commander saved us all," the Volani healer said softly. "His sacrifice will be remembered by every species in this sector." "He would have said he was just doing his job," Bennett replied with tears in her eyes. "Protecting people who needed help." 3 days later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session that would change the course of history. Representatives from hundreds of worlds had come to hear about the battle at Nexus 7 and the humans who had fought alongside 7 alien species. Administrator Zexhai stood before the assembled delegates, his scales showing the deep purple of respect and determination. "The human species has proven themselves worthy of membership in our galactic community," he declared. "They have shown us that strength comes not from following old rules, but from adapting to new challenges." The vote was unanimous. Humanity was officially welcomed as the 8th member of the Galactic Alliance, with full rights and privileges. But more importantly, they were welcomed as friends and partners in building a better future for all species. Captain Sullivan accepted command of a new joint species exploration vessel, the first of its kind. Her crew included beings from all 8 member species, working together to explore the galaxy and bring other isolated worlds into their growing alliance. Engineer Hayes became the head of a new research division dedicated to studying human engineering techniques and adapting them for use by other species. His unconventional methods were slowly revolutionizing alien technology. Dr. Bennett established the first interspecies medical exchange program, teaching human surgical techniques to alien doctors while learning their healing methods. Her work would save millions of lives across the galaxy. Lieutenant Carter founded the Galactic Translation Institute, where young beings from all species learned to communicate with each other. Her language programs became the foundation for true interspecies understanding.